Today for Full Album Friday, we're going to take a look back at the legendary 1967 debut from the Velvet Underground. Simply put, there may be no other record in the entire history of rock music that has as wide-ranging and long-standing an impact and influence as this one, as it's almost impossible to find any album since that hasn't pulled from this one in some way. At the same time, there are few bands, both musically and creatively, that can stand alongside the Velvet Underground. And this record holds such a highly revered status for a good reason. Strangely enough though, this is actually one of those records that almost never happened, as the original 1966 recordings never got picked up by a label. And even after Verve Records picked up the album and had them re-record 3 of the better tracks, it took a number of years before this album caught on in the least bit commercially. This record is also legendary for the big question of who actually produced it, as Norman Dolph and John Licata are often given credit for it, though some say it was actually band member John Cale that was responsible for the sound, and then there are some who say this was the doing of Andy Warhol. Regardless of who was responsible for these sounds, they are far beyond anything else from the time. And this album really kickstarted an entire musical revolution. The big thing on this record is the edge and the dark tones that run throughout it, as there's this gritty, dirty feeling both in the music and the lyrics that point far more to the idea of art than a majority of what else was going on musically at the time. Yet the sounds on the album absolutely run the gamut, from stripped down R&B to spacey, meandering bliss pop to proto-punk to outright experimental sounds and everything in between. Much of this comes from the non-traditional rhythms put forth by John Cale and Maureen Tucker. And when you combine this with the unmistakable guitar tone on every track, you've got the basis for glam and punk and metal and pretty much every rock sound that came after it. It's the way that Sterling Morrison works and weaves his guitar patterns throughout these songs that really presented a brand new approach to the instrument. And along with the other guitar player on this one, they completely rewrote the rules on rock and roll. There's this amazingly raw, completely captivating sound that comes across on every single track. And even more than 4 decades later, these songs never sound old or dated in the least. Of course, working on top of all of this, you have the brilliant vocal delivery and lyrical styles of the one and only Lou Reed. And his work here pretty much defines everything it means to be cool. And the energy, the excitement, and the mood he lends to these tracks is unparalleled. Often working in an almost beat poetry style with his vocal delivery. It's in his performance where you can really see the artsy, rootsy basis for the band's sound. And the fact that he was so forward and blunt with his songs about drugs and sex lyrically, it completely blazed a new path for what was acceptable within the rock and roll world. It's also the way that his voice contrasts with that of Nico that gives a number of these songs their depth, and it pushes the overall sound even deeper into that dark psychedelic sound. This record just overflows with classic musical moments, from Venus and Furs to All Tomorrow's Parties to new standards like Waiting for the Man and of course the legendary Heroin. And to be honest, there's not a bad note anywhere on this record. The Velvet Underground and Nico was truly a groundbreaking musical moment, and it remains a vital root of nearly every rock style that's come about since. And if this one doesn't get very regular plays on your stereo, you're blowing it big time and need to get on that right now. Thank me later.